Hello and welcome to Heyman Nature. I am Adam Heyman, and on this crossover episode with the great Bob Murphy, we discuss a whole bunch of conspiracy theories. We talk about a whole bunch of them, probably the ones that you want to know the most about. Some we think are true, some we think are not true, some we are not sure about. But as we go through these various conspiracy theories, we also try to teach you how to think about such claims in the future going forward, because the world is a mysterious place and people all around are trying to lie to you, and it's easy to get confused. So, without further ado, conspiracy theories with the great Bob Murphy. Enjoy.
Heyman Nature, a journey in search of a peaceful and prosperous society with human nature as a guide. Led by your host, Adam Heyman.
Hello again, Bob Murphy.
Hello again, Adam Heyman.
I am excited. For once,
as well.
Your big brain and all your fancy education, that's not going to help you this time, buddy. We're talking about conspiracy theories this week. And since by definition, it's all about made up knowledge in your own head, you got nothing over me there, Mr. Smarty Guy.
Yeah. And so this is Adam's idea. And so potential employers, keep that in mind if you're thinking about hiring a project. I just couldn't say no to the guy. So joking aside, what we're going to do, folks, in this is do a whirlwind tour. We brainstormed and came up with many popular conspiracy theories. And given our line of work, Adam and I have been known to dabble in this stuff. And so we're just going to go ahead and give you the skinny. Some of them we don't have much to say, but other ones we'll have some things to say. And we report, you decide. And partly it's, at least for why I wanted to. So I'll explain why I was excited by you doing this, because there's a few of these that it's a kind of thing where when I looked into it, I thought, oh, come on, this is ridiculous. And I was like, oh. And so we're not saying these are true, but some of these things, you can put it this way. I can understand why there are people who think they're true. Like, I don't think they're nut jobs. Other ones, yeah, I think you're just a loony, but like, I can't even believe some of them people are actually serious. I think they're trolling. But and some of them is not the case.
Yeah, and Bob and I didn't go through this list and check notes with each other, but I'll just tell you before we start, I believe in at least one of the ones we're going to talk about. So
you don't think Abraham Lincoln was always telling the truth?
I think he's a conehead under that big hat.
That's the ticket. Okay, so we will start. And folks, we're going to try to go through the list like it's going to get juicier as we go along. All right, so why don't we start with an easy one, the fluoride in the water. Do you have anything you want to add to that or say on that one?
I thought I had nothing until someone just an hour before we got started forwarded me a CNN article saying that some study says that fluoride makes IQs lower over a 9-year period study, which I don't necessarily believe. But no, other than that, I don't know anything about the fluoride in the water conspiracy.
Yeah, I don't know too much. I had seen that there were some things coming out, like the meme here is Alex Jones singing "Makes the Frogs Gay," and there was something that came out that it didn't say in scientific jargon, increases the rate of homosexuality among amphibian creatures. But there was something where people were running around saying he was right. All I will say on it is what's interesting, and here I'm just mostly doing this and put this topic in the list for a service to those who are fans of Murray Rothbard. Rothbard actually has an essay on this topic. And so, because this has been a big deal for a while, that it was in Dr. Strangelove. People may remember that, Mandrake, children's ice cream, Mandrake. Really, talk about your commie conspiracy theory, right? So this goes back, and so Rothbard was aware of this allegation, and so he had written an essay. I haven't read that in a while. It wasn't. He didn't say anything about the proclivities of frogs in it. And it wasn't as juicy as you might hope, but on the other hand, he was saying that at the very least, it was like a public relations effort or whatever, like a thing for companies to get all the governments to buy the fluoride. You know what I mean? Like juicing up the alleged studies showing that this is good stuff, right? So he, at the very least, he's dubious about why are we doing this. So anyway, I'll try to find that link. Yeah,
that's just standard rent seeking. That doesn't rise to the level of a conspiracy theory. A conspiracy theory would be, well, yeah.
Why don't we start and explain that term and what qualifies and what doesn't?
A conspiracy theory would be, well, yeah, it turns the frogs bisexual, but that's only a side effect of the fact that the fluoride is used to mind control the populace. Mm-hmm. So yeah, conspiracy theory, I believe the term originated from the CIA because
that itself is a conspiracy theory.
Yes, but they were trying to deflect from all the people that thought that the Lee Harvey Oswald a single magic bullet theory didn't quite satisfy all their questions on the subject. So yeah, it is a term used by the corporate media and quote the people in charge unquote to dismiss people that challenge the conventional narrative. Is that a satisfactory definition?
I think so, yes. But what's interesting to me, like if you just analyze the phrase, like the way it's used, some people take it to mean a dubious, wildly implausible explanation of events based on paranoia.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But what's interesting is the actual term, that's not what it means. So for example, if you say, how did Julius Caesar die? The standard narrative is a conspiracy theory.
Sure, yeah.
Right? The official 9/11 report is a conspiracy theory. It's saying a bunch of 19 guys conspired to do this, terrorist act. So it's interesting that if you say, I don't believe any conspiracy theories around 9/11, you say, oh, so you don't believe in the official report?
It is weird that they chose those two words melded together to be the thing to hang around the neck of everybody to paint him as a lunatic if they question what the government is telling them.
Now, what's interesting is both the blue pill and red pill people, for lack of better terms, kind of embrace that incorrectly. And so on the one hand, like I said, that the blue pill people will say, oh yeah, that's just a conspiracy theory, as if, it's not like saying, oh yeah, that's just a hypothesis based on data. You know what I mean? Like they'd be like, what? Or that's just a hypothesis based on self-interested behavior. What do you, okay, yeah, it is. So, but then also on the flip side too, there's a lot of red pill people that I think use it in that way, but meaning, yeah, that's why it's correct. You know what I mean? That, and where I'm coming from is there was one time a debate at Pork Fest, between what's his name? Austin Peterson was the anti side, and I can't remember who the pro side was off the top of my head, but they were debating conspiracy theories, like as a class. And I just thought that was ludicrous that was the framing of the debate for both people. You know what I mean? Again,
we should believe them all or we should reject them all. That
right.
Sort of
and and then in practice, I didn't listen to the whole thing. I read some things of summarizing the positions, and probably I agreed with a lot of what Austin would have said in there, even, but anyway, so yeah, in practice it was less ridiculous with that. But yeah, my understanding was from the time that, because I saw some people complaining about that, and they were just saying, yeah, if you want to debate specific conspiracy theories, okay, but they're debating the class. So I thought that was kind of ridiculous. So anyway, yes, that I'm saying that we're playing into that as well, just by us saying, hey, we're talking about conspiracy theories, and people know that we weren't, we're not going to talk about, hey, do you know that unions want to raise wages because they get paid more money? No, seriously, that's what they're doing. They're doing it.
That's what they're doing. You mentioned red pill and blue pill. Shall I give a little definition of those just in case?
Do it, in case I think my dad actually knows what that is. I asked him one time, but yeah, go ahead.
So, most people have at least a fuzzy idea, but the way I tentatively define it is being red pilled. It's from the Matrix. Do you want to take the thing that gets you out of the Matrix? It is the realization that at least one, if not most, of the standard stories delivered to you by the talking heads on TV and the government writ large are not necessarily the truth, but they are propaganda and illusions designed to control you in some way and keep you in the system, which is why they used, the Matrix terminology. And a blue pill person, just believes what they hear on coming out of the mouth of Rachel Maddow or whatever, or whatever the talking head is. And I absolutely love, I think it's a Michael Malice original quote, once you become red pilled, the key is to take one and not just the whole bottle. Because, once you figure out, like a lot of people recently got red pilled over recent stuff like COVID, the origins, the medical truth or not truth of statements made about the vaccine and the benefits of masking and social distancing. They got red pilled over Russiagate. People maybe your age and closer to mine, the Iraq claims of weapons of mass destruction was a pretty big red pill. The Gulf of Tonkin episode that led us into Vietnam, among others. And even way before us, World War I or World War II propaganda had to have red pilled a bunch of people back at the time. So I'm totally sympathetic to people who believe reflexively conspiracy theories, because once it occurs to you that your government, the people that you trusted, and the news, supposedly keeping a watchdog on government, once they're willing to lie to you in concert, well, heck, it's not that crazy to just be suspicious of everything.
And not because you tried out a new outfit and you said, hey, does this make me look fat? And they're like, oh, no, that's not what we mean when we say they're willing to lie to you, and you've caught them many times.
More nefarious statements than that.
Right.
Yeah. So we've already admitted we don't know nothing about fluoride. What do you want to dive into?
Let's do a fun one to make sure people don't turn away here and switch to a classic rock station or something. How about the Epstein stuff?
Let's do it.
So you want to go ahead and say what you want to say on that one?
No.
What I mean is, did Gene Epstein really start the Soho Forum in Soho? Because I went there and it was not south of Houston Street. So
and
that's
most
my conspiracy
people
theory.
Across the country say Houston when they're talking about places with that spelling. So, you figure it out.
Yeah.
So how? No, we're talking about how long was that a famous meme on the internet, Bob? Epstein did not kill himself. That was beautiful and delightful, and it just didn't disappear.
But even there, yeah. Do you want to? Sorry, I don't mean.
All right, I'll say what I think.
But off the top of your head, because I don't want to say something. The point of this episode, folks, is we're trying to say ironclad things. I don't want to misstate something, but it's crazy how the guards fell asleep and there's no
Cameras
footage.
Didn't work.
Yeah. That's okay. So
the person that he was in there with, his cellmate, was this ex-cop or some dubious creepy. If you were going to do a casting call for a movie for the guy who's going to do an assassination for the government, you'd pick someone like this. And of course the motives are all there. Some of the most powerful people in our planet, not just our country. Supposedly this guy has the goods on them, the Epstein's list, whether that exists or not, videotape. So anyway, all the things are there to make us think that he did not kill himself. He was in fact murdered. And I would guess that he probably was, but I'd like to introduce, because this is the perfect place for it. A lot of people, when they're introduced to hypotheses that fall under the rubric of conspiracy theories, think that you have to land on one side or another in a binary fashion. I either reject this claim or I completely, totally believe this claim. And I don't think of things that way. If you forced me to pick one of those two, I'd say, yeah, he was murdered, because all sorts of people that have the power to turn the cameras off and pull the guards away wanted him dead. But strictly speaking, I don't have any real convincing proof of that. I don't know where that would come from. So I'm saying that just to lay down the groundwork that you don't have to be sure of any of these things. A lot of people, it seems like they feel like they have to say whether they believe it or not, like a religious thing or something.
Yeah, I think so. And let me just, so on this stuff, again, with most of these, or not again, let me say for the first time, my personal position is, for a lot of this stuff, that I am absolutely certain the official story is not what happened.
Sure.
And then, but if you say, okay, well then what did happen? And then, so that's kind of where the rub comes in. And so on this Epstein thing, I will refer people to Daryl Cooper. So we know, he is,
oh yeah,
remember the same guy, that was got into
Martyr
hot
Maid.
water.
Yeah,
Yes,
Martyr Maid
Martyr
podcast,
Maid
yeah.
is his thing. Martyr Maid podcast. He, real big on. Was it in September he blew up with going on Tucker's show?
He was getting some additional heat right after October 7th, just because years earlier he had done a big, huge podcast series on the history of the creation of Israel. He'd been doing that since the last mass bombing campaign that was in 2014 or something like that. So he got a lot of press from that, and then when he went on Tucker, he really blew up, so to speak.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I was actually, somebody had told me, hey, Bob, you got to get this guy on. So Dave Smith had been talking about this guy and said, yeah, I forget what the name of that series was. The Israel-Palestine thing was great.
Called Fear and Loathing in
Yes,
New Jerusalem.
great, yes. And so that's, David put people on his radar. I think Dave mentioned it on Joe Rogan's show at least once. And so that got, Daryl some traction. But I think it was around August of 2024, so before he was humongous, before the infamous Tucker appearance where, he said Winston Churchill was the chief villain or whatever those exact words were. Somebody sent me, he had done a series on Epstein, among other things, making the case that he was either working directly for or, one degree of separation with Mossad. Okay. And so that series, I will just point people to, but one of the things, this is all I'll say just as a tidbit to get people like, what the heck is, so Jeffrey Epstein, here, I'm going to read I like reading from Wikipedia when possible, just because it's so, conventional opinion and whatever, that it's hard to dismiss that. Oh yeah, that's just some, you're going to David Icke's website or something. Okay. So here's the Wikipedia entry on Jeffrey Epstein. I'm going to flip down. Teaching. Epstein started working in September 1974 as a physics and math teacher for teens at the Dalton School on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Donald Barr, who served as the headmaster until June of 74, was known to have made several unconventional recruitments at the time, although it was unclear whether he had a direct role in hiring Epstein. Okay. So 3 months after Barr's departure, Epstein began to teach at the school despite his lack of credentials. Okay, so there it's, explaining that, this was an elite private school. Wealthy families in Manhattan would send their kids to school, and Epstein starts teaching there as a physics and math teacher, and he didn't have the background. He wasn't qualified to do that. And then, in the same thing, Epstein allegedly showed inappropriate behavior towards underage female students at the time. Okay, so that's. But what's interesting about that is the Donald Barr, who was the principal, right? During this period when Epstein gets hired, it's not, ironclad that Barr was directly involved, but, the timelines somewhat match up there. He is the father of Bob Barr, who was the attorney general, overseeing everything when all that went down. And then also, just as a little tidbit, Donald Barr, when he's not making unconventional hires at private schools in New York, was a novelist. And if you'll just permit me, Adam, have we talked about this? Do you know what I'm going to read here?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Okay.
But yeah.
So here is, because I don't remember if we covered it. I know I've mentioned on the Bob Murphy Show by myself. I don't know if we ever did in a crossover. But anyway, I'll make this fast, folks. I know there's tons of material to do here. But so Donald Barr, Bob Barr's father, is it Bob Barr or Bill Barr? There's two different Barrs. I might be conflating them. Who's the Attorney General?
Bill.
Yeah, Attorney General William Barr. Yeah, Bill Barr. Yeah, so not Bob Barr. Bob Barr, somebody else. So Donald Barr, who is Bill Barr's father, who we think was probably involved in hiring Epstein, when he was unqualified, had this novel called Space Relations. And so here's the Wikipedia entry for this novel that Donald Barr wrote. And so I'll just very quickly read the plot summary from Wikipedia. In the future, humans have formed an intergalactic empire ruled by aristocrats. During a time of war with the John Craig, a formerly liberal Earthman in his 30s, is dispatched to the strategically important planet Kosar, a human colony that was settled by this a Carlisle society as a place of exile for political extremists, and now is ruled by an oligarchical high council of 7 nobles, each of whom is in charge of a different domain. Their boredom and absolute power have driven them to madness, to the point that Kosar's entry into the empire has been stymied by the man-inhabited planet's treaties clause against alliances with slave-owning societies. Okay. Due to its practice of kidnapping humans to become illegal playthings of the galaxy's super rich. Okay, so this is taking a turn. So Craig, who is now campaigning to bring Kassar into the Empire, even though it's got this problem, had previously been to the planet when the passenger ship on which he was traveling on a return trip from the Betelgeuse Conference was captured by space pirates. While en route to Kassar, one of the pirates awakened Craig and the other prisoners to rape a 15-year-old virginal redheaded female captive in front of them. The rapist's fellow pirates later hear of this and dock his pay as punishment for spoiling her market value. Craig then spent 2 years as a slave of the beautiful, sensual, and sadistic Lady Morgan Sidney, the only female member of the oligarchy with whom he became romantically involved. Together, they lived in her castle, ruling over and engaging in sexual relations with those under their dominion, including an enslaved teenager at a clinic used to breed enslaved people. When Craig stumbles on hints of an alien invasion, okay. Craig is depicted as, last sentence, folks, or 2 sentences. Craig is depicted as undisturbed by Lady Morgan's sadism. When he is ordered to sexually assault the enslaved teenager, he enjoys his participation in the act. Okay, so again, with all the other stuff going on, just this weird quirk that Donald Barr, who's Bill Barr's father, happened to have written a novel where rich oligarchs, bored with their power, enslave and rape a bunch of teenagers. Kind of interesting, given what ended up happening. So, again, that's all spelled out in Daryl Cooper's podcast series on the topic.
Yeah, I listened to that. It's fascinating and revolting. And with the Epstein thing, there's 2 conspiracy theories, really. I mean, there's one, did he kill himself or not? And then there's the other, is he actually what he looks like, which is a curator of honeypots and extortion and blackmail materials to be used on the rich and powerful, such that the people that really rule over us can use this material to get our world leaders to do their bidding. I mean, I think this is sort of thing's been going on for a long time. And again, although I don't have any specific evidence that Epstein was doing that, it's just like central casting. He looks exactly like that's what he is. And his background in finance looks like nothing more than figuring out a way to get rich people to not have to pay taxes on stuff. I mean, that was his first foray in finance, I think.
Oh, yeah. And that's partly what, again, folks, if you're curious, what Daryl goes over in the series is just the numbers he was posting and the clients he allegedly was getting, given his background in the financial sector. It was like, there's no way people with that much money would be given such big contracts or accounts over to this guy who, he had gotten booted from a more conventional Wall Street firm, after like a year or something like that, because they got into regulatory trouble or something like that. So anyway, it was just, none of it made any sense on paper. So there's a bunch of weird things going on. It reminded me, I hadn't thought of this in years, but that's actually, did you ever read the John Steinbeck novel East of Eden?
No, I never did.
Okay, so anyway, that's one of the, I don't want to spoil it, but one of the subplots in that is there's a character, like a madam who runs a brothel, and this is back in the day, like, and that's apparently the thing, like, famous, powerful people would come there, and then she would take photos of them unbeknownst to them, and then show them afterwards, and then hey, it'd be a shame if people got these photos, wouldn't it? So that's why you're going to start paying me, hush money kind of thing. So that's kind of how she amassed her power behind the scenes. So anyway, yes, that's maybe Epstein was an avid reader. Well, he probably read his dad's book, that's for sure. Or not his dad's book, his former employer's book.
So since we're keeping score here, do you believe both of the Epstein conspiracy theories?
That he was blackmailing people and that he didn't kill himself?
Yeah, and then
those are 2 theories?
Yes.
I definitely don't think he killed himself. And then as far as the blackmail, it's a little bit, I don't know, as far as like how much was it they knew full well what they were doing, and it was, you know what I mean, like a sort of like when you do a gang initiation, you're like, hey, go kill that guy and we're all going to be with you, so that way we know we're all going down together, like that kind of a weird thing.
You mean a Diddy party? Yes.
Yes, exactly. And by the way, since we're talking about crazy conspiracy, that's also why, not that this wasn't officially on our list, but if you ever seen the ostensible Bohemian Grove footage that Alex Jones said he got?
Yeah, or parts of it, yeah.
Yeah, and so, that could be anything. Alex Jones could have hired a bunch of people to go out in a forest somewhere and do that. But as far as, could there be secret things where powerful people get together? Like, and when I say powerful, I mean like people who own banks in Europe and major media empires and major policy. Like if they really do go have these secret parties and just doing crazy, like slaughtering animals and drinking blood, and you could say, oh, come on. Well, like that's so, lascivious, and give me a break. Why would they do? But it occurred to me, if you were bringing in someone relatively new, like, some guy who's the new president of some major media conglomerate, and he's just meeting these people for the first time, and he's going out thinking, well, we're going to do some wheeling and dealing behind the scenes, and then they're all dressed up like crazy people in the woods drinking animal blood. Like, you would think, I'm not going to cross these people. You know what I mean? Like, you say, by the way, this is all going to be hush-hush, right? Like, yep.
Well,
yep,
also, if you participate, you're in. I mean, initiation rituals are very, very old in our species, and there's a reason for it. Once you do these sorts of things with others, you are bonded. It's not like you're not just going to run away from these people after you've been that intimate and they know something really weird about you.
Right. So let me be clear on that one, folks. I'm not saying, oh, yeah, I think Alex Jones, that footage is real. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, though, is, my initial, and I'm sure yours, if you're a conventional person, reaction to hearing some of these things, like, oh, come on, guys, this is just, why would they do that? And I'm saying, no, that isn't a great way to dismiss it. Like, there would be, even if you don't believe in witchcraft, if you're a total materialist and, I'm very scientific, I'm just saying, even the people involved, not that they think, oh, he's going to put a hex on me, but just to know somebody who's this nuts that would sit there and drink goat's blood, or, whatever the story is, it's not just that he's going to be upset with me if I double cross him.
Right.
I don't want to mess. Kind of like the Joker in, the Heath Ledger Joker.
Yeah.
Like you realize that's why he takes over. No, his crew is not going to double cross him.
Ever.
They're not going to go, give him up to the FBI or, if Bruce Wayne offers a reward. No, you're not. So
in a way, the Epstein one, I'm sorry we did it, so early, because it is one of the rare ones where I do believe it without having definitive proof. It's just such a preponderance of weirdness that I tend to believe it. Not 100%.
Yeah.
But I'm on board.
Okay. How about one? Okay, let's do an easy one. The flat Earth stuff.
Yeah, I think those people are. Here's the question: do you think it was started by someone who actually believed it, or was it a troll?
Well, this is what's interesting. So, Owen Benjamin, who later folks will get into the moon stuff, who was was big. There was a period, and this is why I actually was more inclined to listen to him initially on this, his crazy conspiracy theory, is because I think he was on Dave Smith's show. Like, this was years ago when he made the case about the moon stuff, which we'll get to eventually, folks. But then Dave brought up the flat Earth stuff, and Owen said, "Oh, I think that's a psyop that the whoever, the CIA or whatever, is instituting in order to discredit actual conspiracies." Like, in other words, at that point he was saying, "Yeah, this is crazy." And then Owen got on board with it. And I even asked him one time on Twitter, like, didn't you used to think? And he said, yeah, I did used to think that, but the more I looked into it, now I'm a believer in flat Earth stuff. So, and then he's since clarified and said, I'm not saying it's flat Earth. I'm just saying it's not around Earth. Like, that's what his actual position. He's like, I don't know what it is. I'm just saying the official story. So
one more time, ladies and gentlemen, one red pill, not the whole bottle.
Okay, but the reason I like going over this one is just to show folks, it's not that Adam and I, if on some of these other, and you and I may end up disagreeing on some of these, Adam, but it's not to say that, oh, hey, unless it's like a geometric proof, for all we know, this could be true. That's not like, so the flat Earth stuff to me, no, it's just so overwhelming. There's so many things that are consistent with the hypothesis. Yes. Like, for example, we can look out with telescopes and other planets certainly seem to be spherical. Right? And so it'd be weird if ours were the exception. And then things like, the shadow of the Earth on the moon, it's at least a disc, right? Because, the curvature, right? It's not, and then you can say, okay, but why is it a sphere? It could just be a flat disc, right? Except, like, when ships go over the horizon, the bottom of the ship disappears first, and then you slowly see the mass sink down, the way it would look if the Earth were spherical. But if it were just a flat disc, that it went out for a while and then, there was an edge, that's not what it would look like. You know what I mean? So anyway, there's lots of things that you can go do on your own. Whereas
This
some of
one
these
is,
other ones, we can't go and see, did Epstein hang himself or not? Like there's some evidence and that's it. Whereas you can go do all kinds of experiments yourself
this
to
one,
see. Yeah.
this one is so obvious that it's a good time to bring up, I think, some mental techniques that'll keep you sane.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of the documentary effect, Bob?
No.
A documentary is a narrative, and they're trying to convince you of a thing. And like one of the big ones is like the first Michael Jackson documentary. If you watch it, you'll get to the end and you'll think, well, this guy clearly diddled little kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few years later, another one came out and documentary, and you get to the end of that and you'll be completely convinced that every claim against Michael Jackson was obviously a fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And it mirrors this flat earth thing. If you do nothing but go watch 2 or 3 flat earth videos and you don't know that much about science, you will be convinced, or it'll be very easy to be convinced. So anytime a weird theory comes across your YouTube feed and you start thinking that it might be true, take the time as a mental exercise to go look for as much evidence as you can find that debunks this theory. At least give yourself a shot to see the other documentaries, and it'll safeguard your mind from just starting to think goofy things. Because, how are we supposed to know? The world is a complicated place. You tell me all these people are getting killed over in the Donbass region of Ukraine. I don't even know if that place even exists. I got to take the word of some talking head on a YouTube thing about it. So, yeah, I doubt anybody who started believing in the flat Earth theory ever looked once at the debunk sites, telling people why that's not true.
Yeah, that's a good example or your point. And that's why this stuff fascinates me. So when the flat Earth stuff came out, you're right. I didn't just say, "Oh, you bunch of idiot." Like I went in to see because I had to know, like, how could they think that? And I went in, and you're right. It's not just them saying, "No, I don't trust these scientists." That's not what they're doing. No, they're giving very
semi-plausible reasons.
And they're also saying, here's just like what I said 10 minutes ago, that, there's experiments you can go do yourself. They will also do things like that. And one of them, and actually Owen, when I had him on my show and we talked about that, he was throwing out a certain principle or concept that I didn't know what he was talking about. And so he just thought, oh yeah, you don't even, you're just a lightweight in this arena, Murphy.
Read a book, Murphy.
And it was something about, snipers don't adjust for the curvature of the earth, and like there, it's tricky because some people will say they do and some will say they don't. You know what I mean? It's like with a lot of this stuff, it's like, well, if it's just an expert testimony, well, if you got different experts saying different things, what are you going to do? But anyway, there was one, it was something about like a certain number of degrees, and he just threw that out there. And it had to do with, if the earth were round, you would see such and such. It had to do with like the displacement in the horizon or something like that. And anyway, like you said, Ed, I went and looked it up, and the official explanation as to, like, it's the kind of thing where prima facie, you're right. You say, oh, geez, I don't know if I believe in a spherical earth, it's an oblong spheroid probably. I actually can't answer that objection. It was something like, if you're standing on the top of a skyscraper looking out, you don't see further. It was something like that. Like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something that, well, if this theory were true, this is what you would see, but go do it yourself, folks. And you don't see that, where what you do see is consistent if it were just an infinite plane, or, a plane that was much farther than what the conventional story says. And the debunking was actually kind of sophisticated, like showing there's a few different things going. And then once you see it, yes, with Newtonian physics, you can explain the phenomenon. But until I saw that demonstration, I wouldn't have been able to answer it. And so I can see why, if for some reason you're inclined to think, and I like Bill Burr's joke on this. Have you ever seen it, Adam, where he goes, I'm open to it, but like, what's in it for them? Like, how do they benefit from making us believe in is it just the globe manufacturers?
Right. Snow globe manufacturer. Yeah, the Atlas.
Okay, right. So folks, we're just establishing Adam and I are not complete nut jobs. We are willing to just say, no, that's stupid. All right. And I'm trying to give you
cover. That's the cover I give off so I can really believe the real crazy things, I think.
Okay. Do you want to do the USS Liberty?
Yeah. The conspiracy is that it's everybody acknowledges that Israel's IDF in 1967 just went on an afternoon-long strafing and bombing and torpedoing campaign against the USS Liberty. June 8th, 1967, right as the Six-Day War, I think, was just starting. The official claim is that it was just an accident. They somehow thought all afternoon that it was an Egyptian ship. And I just don't believe that's true. I've seen testimony from the crew and various other pieces of evidence from here and there, and I think that Israel, the USS Liberty, was a spy ship. It was working for the NSA, gathering whatever intelligence they could pick up out of the air, and I think that Israel just did not want whatever it was they were doing to be picked up by a spy ship, and they knew full well what kind of ship they were trying to sink, and they tried like hell to sink it, and it's a miracle that they only killed 34 American sailors and injured another 170 some. And yeah, I just, you look at the pictures of the ship with all the bullet holes in it, and they threw napalm down on the deck and take torpedo boats out and launched five torpedoes at this boat and only hit it with one and didn't sink it. Yeah, I'm just not buying the IDF story here. I think that scrappy little Israel just didn't give a darn if they sank an American Navy ship.
Yeah, I don't have anything much to add on that, except recently, for some reason, it came up again, and Scott Horton retweeted something he had done earlier where he just had a compilation of statements from various knowledgeable, like U.S. admirals and people who are on the USS, just saying in unequivocal terms, like, no, they knew who we were. There's no way that they were mistaken for that long, and that's the state of an attack.
It's even more tragic is, the Sixth Fleet was like a couple hours away, and they got a Mayday out, and they scrambled jets to go help them early in the afternoon, and somebody from up above told them to turn around and go back. And ostensibly, this went as high up as Lyndon Baines Johnson, who said, I think the quote is, "I don't give a darn about dead sailors. I'm not going to embarrass my good allies, Israel." And I didn't go too far to try and figure out if that's a true quote or not, but I do believe that an attack that goes on in broad daylight and perfect visibility, on a nice Mediterranean summer day, I just don't believe that those ships or all those planes all afternoon on all those ships didn't know that was a U.S. ship when they were trying to sink it. I just don't believe that.
Now, I had seen, I think this was Scott, and it's been a while since I saw the tweet. I believe he was throwing out the possibility. In other words, it wasn't Scott saying, I'm sure this is what happened. But I think there had been some Israeli atrocity that was occurring in that time frame.
Yeah.
And they were concerned, it wasn't just the general, hey, we don't want somebody in our business. It was like, oh, we're doing something right here that we don't want the world to know about. And
for sure, it's easy to imagine a motive. Mm-hmm. I don't want to pin my belief or disbelief on this particular theory on that, because I don't have any information about any atrocity, but I do believe that in a war, almost everybody commits atrocities. I don't know if I've ever heard of a war where that didn't happen. So, but just in general, if you're
maybe the war on Christmas.
You mean the Christmas side didn't commit any atrocities?
Well, that, but also just, saying season's greetings, that's not really an atrocity. It's just more obnoxious.
That's not true, Bob. Some of those Starbucks holiday cups are literal atrocities.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you're right. I stand corrected. See, folks, we disagree. All right. Well, speaking of that, do you want to maybe say Pearl Harbor? Because that's somewhat similar. So the question being, it ranges from that it was deliberately provoked and they knew it was coming to just, they should have seen it coming and they didn't, to a more general, so there's different things.
Yeah, there are different layers. I'll tell you what I believe.
Sure.
I have some question about whether the United States actually could or did intercept and translate, decode the various Japanese military and diplomatic codes that were being sent right before the attack. I can't say, I don't have an opinion about that, but I did read what's the dude's name? Hang on a second. Here he is. Day of Deceit by Robert Stinnett.
Yep.
And I am convinced that, I mean, it's a fact that FDR wanted in that war very badly. And he knew that the American populace, having just gone through the horrors of World War I 20 years ago, didn't want to have anything to do with it. But he wanted in. And I believe that he got a memo from Commander McCollum laying out an 8-point plan by which you could diplomatically deny the Japanese fleet access to oil as they're, engaged in their war with China. And people say there's no proof that FDR even ever saw that memo, but it is a fact that almost all 8, if not all 8 of those points were enacted by American policymakers, such that it's pretty easy to predict that if Japan wanted oil in their war, they had to do something to get us off their back. And I find it very confusing and inconvenient that those battleships were left at Pearl Harbor defenseless when it should have been obvious that at least they were in danger.
Yeah. So what is definitely the case is, so I read the same book, and you're right. I think he makes a lot of convincing evidence. So again, folks, if you haven't been into this, it is crystal clear that FDR was saying one thing to the American public and behind the scenes was doing everything in his power to get the U.S. into World War II. All right. And, provoking the Japanese on various fronts. Like that's just, and even historians who are pro FDR will admit that and just say like, well, yeah, because the American people are stupid. After the horrors of World War I, they were now engaged in isolationism, and look at the Holocaust. And isn't it good? Like that's, in other words, that's one of the virtues in their mind of FDR is the noble lie. And you can understand the American people and their unwillingness to get embroiled into another European war, but FDR knew better, and he understood.
That's why we elect leaders, because we don't know. We're not elites. We're not super smart and principled and moral.
Right. So I'm just saying, in case this isn't on your radar, that hey, no pun intended, that's it's even pro FDR people concede that he was not transparent with the American public. And it wasn't like when Pearl Harbor happened, he was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they hit us. This is awful. I guess we have no choice. No, that's not what his reaction was.
Definitely.
What's also true is the American, and I was Googling there trying to find and I can't find the exact example, but the Americans, they broke the Japanese naval encryption at one point, but they didn't want to let the Japanese know that they had broken the code. And so there was a thing, and I don't know if you
No, I know what you're talking about.
There was an example where they had to let they couldn't warn somebody.
Yes,
or they couldn't send reinforcement. And it wasn't Pearl Harbor. The example I have.
Just one ship, I believe. But there's an incident where I can defend that, tactically, that you don't want to give up a very important chess piece that you have, which is that we've broken your code and you don't know it, in order to save a PT boat. I mean, if you're in a hideous war, I can see a general or an admiral, making that decision.
And it was kind of neat the way they figured out something too. Like they had a U.S. base say a fake thing about we had an explosion, our desalination plant broke down, so we need water or something. Like they did some kind of ruse that then the Japanese picked up on, and that's how they were sure that, okay, yes, we've broken their code and da-da-da-da. But anyway, yes, again, to make sure we're getting the point across, folks, it is undenied, like it's stipulated as fact, that the U.S. Navy intentionally let certain sailors die because they knew an attack was coming, and if they were to get ready for it, the Japanese would have realized, how did they know we were coming? They must have broken our code, and they would have changed the code. And the people in charge just decided, hey, people are going to die in war, and no, we're going to save more American sailors' lives if we let the Japanese continue to think we haven't cracked their code yet. So so given that you think it's unavoidable that we're going to get into this war, you could, make the case, you can understand how someone could get into the mindset, just like if you're going to be melting hundreds of thousands of children,
Yeah.
right? And people defend that all the time, right? Say, hey, it's
Yeah.
war. You say, yeah, it's a shame that if you thought, and the dispute is clearly had things worked perfectly, they would have seen the Japanese fleet go into Pearl Harbor. And so the dispute is, was it just a snafu? And you really don't understand until you actually are in the military. You don't understand how inefficient it is. And even though these people were warning about stuff and whatever, hey, you should be on the lookout. There's enemy activity in this area, and it just doesn't get up the chain of command, and they weren't ready. Versus, oh yeah, they knew it was coming, and they deliberately did.
Yeah, that's the part that has me questioning about whether they got the thing decoded into Washington in time. I just didn't see enough to make me convinced.
Mm-hmm.
As an interesting aside, technically, did you ever hear about exactly how they cracked the Japanese code? It's pretty interesting.
Tell me.
They took the message and they printed it up to like 4 or 5x size, and then they held it in front of their face and they squinted. Hey, racist joke. Racist joke.
Oh my gosh. All right. So let's see. How about let's do one that won't be. Well, I don't know. Maybe it'll be quick or not. The climate change stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So here, because I've done a lot of work on that, I will just say very briefly on that. When I say, I really, folks, there's several, I don't know, at least 10 years probably where that was kind of my area, the economics of climate change. And so what I did in the beginning, and Rob Bradley, set me on this beat, as it were, and he said, you got to just go reading the IPCC reports. Okay. And that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And I started wading in through that, and I understood why the true believers were true believers, right? So there's a lot of stuff in there. I will sum it up by saying what they did is they come up with models that have a lot of variables, and then looking backwards, they can tweak the parameters to basically reproduce the observed warming.
Hindcasting.
Yes, exactly. And so it's not that they're lying or anything, but then the issue was those models that reasonably fit the models and which had a high sensitivity of the system to carbon dioxide emissions. Then going forward, and as of the last time when I did, this was several years ago at this point, but I went in and checked the models, and they were on the verge of falling below the 95% confidence interval of the projection, given the emissions and what they thought the warming was going to be. And I was just using their own work against them, if you get what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't going to the Heritage Foundation and just copying and pasting their results. I was going to the believers who were showing the models. And I see we've got, confidence projection. And I was just looking at it and saying, why are you looking at that graph and thinking you guys are crushing it? No, you're on the verge of being outside the 95% confidence interval. And the other thing, too, is just to explain the way that was being expressed was almost backwards from the way normally you mean it in those statistical things. So normally what you do in a hypothesis test in terms of like statistics is you'll say, I've got some theory that, giving people this drug will make them lose weight. And then what you do is you say, okay, well, I want to, have a 95% confidence interval. And so you'll say, okay, the null hypothesis is this drug doesn't reduce weight. And so we know people's weight's going to fluctuate. And so you look at their past weight and you get a sense of the variance and so forth. And then you want to say, okay, now that, we've got the control group and then the other group and we're given them the thing, and you want to look at the difference. And so even if it is that the treatment group who got the drug, let's say on average their weight did go down, but if it only went down a little bit and it was within the 95% confidence interval, you would say, okay. And so it's only if it's like, no. Given the variability in weight that we've just seen historically, in only 5%, there's less than a 5% chance that the drop we see from the group that took the pill could be explained by random chance, right? And so that's why you're going to say, no, given that the chance of this just being due to randomness is less than 5%, I reject the null hypothesis, and I think that drug has something to do with the weight loss. right? So you're going the other way. You're assuming you're stacking the deck against yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here they were doing the opposite, right? So their models, as when I looked at this stuff, right? So this, what I'm saying now is at this point probably 8 years dated. So I don't know how things have been since. But as of when I looked at this stuff, I took their own projections when they were saying, see, it's well within the confidence interval of the models. And so again, they back, 10 years before that analysis, the models made projections. And then given what the, emission trajectory were, you can figure out, okay, what would the model have said the Earth's warming should have been? And the actual warming was below what the model said how hot the Earth should get in response to all these emissions. And so, I'm saying it was flirting with, it was almost rejected. And so they were taking it like we're crushing it when, do you get what I'm saying? It's not that we rejected the idea that emissions had nothing to do with it. It was the other way around.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
And I'm not a scientist, but I do have a finance degree. I understand financial models, and those things are not driven by data. They're driven by assumptions. And speaking of hindcasting, let me tell you a little story early in my gambling career.
Mm-hmm.
My buddy and I went to the dog track for several months in Phoenix, going to college. And we had an idea that wisdom of crowds, you'd get some sort of consistent series of data by analyzing what the odds were at some consistent time right before post, like 2 minutes right before post. Take a record of all the odds and then take this data over months and months and months, and then try and hindcast your way into seeing if there were some betting patterns that could be profitable. And lo and behold, 2 distinct betting patterns proved to be possible. So we sauntered down to the dog track and started firing at it. And we lost several $1,000s because the hindcasting was not future predictive in the slightest. 2 months wasn't enough. 2 years probably wasn't going to be enough. 2 decades probably wasn't going to ever be enough. And I look at these climate models the same way. It's garbage assumptions. The people who think, without reading as you did, the IPCC, they think they're modeling the climate in some scientific way, but they're not. They do not understand anything about the complex positive and negative feedback cycles of this complicated planet. They don't know how clouds work. They don't know how many trees are on the planet. They don't know how the ocean reacts to heat. They're just fiddling around. And if you dig into, like, I've written 3 articles recently here on heymannature.substack.com. You can go look at them. When you dig into the fiddling they do to try and make these models make sense, you're not looking at bioscientists here. You're looking at statistical nerds fiddling with models and assumptions. And that wasn't the kind of scientific method that I was taught in school. I think these are propagandists.
Yeah. And there's a Mott and Bailey.
Mott and Bailey. Yeah.
Mott and Bailey. Jeez. That's like a Dickens character would say something like that. Was it a malapropism? Is that what that is? So where you'll see people say things like, oh, this is basic chemistry. Like so-and-so demonstrated this, the greenhouse effect back in, 1905 or whatever the thing is. And no, the basic, direct amount, as this atmosphere's concentration of CO2 increases, the direct, extra greenhouse effect, that's not what the dispute is. Right. Like you're saying, Adam, they have to build in that, oh, there's a positive feedback from the various possible processes. Well, again, it's possible, but to say that, oh, as it gets hotter, then, it melts some of the ice caps. And so then there's not as much reflective, white surface on the Earth. So the Earth absorbs more heat because of that. And then, you know what I mean? So there's all kinds of, like you said, clouds. As of when I was looking at it, one guy was pointing out and saying they don't even know what sign to put on the clouds at that point. They're not even sure. If more cloudiness, increases.
One recent paper literally said, we think in general it'll balance itself out. The cooling effects of clouds and the warming effects of clouds. And here was a funny one. Things weren't, the models weren't doing what they thought they were going to do. And they did track down a reason. It wasn't all the volcano ash being spread out everywhere. That's natural and therefore couldn't possibly be a culprit. But they did figure out that passing laws a couple of years ago to make ocean going cargo vessels not emit pollutants turned out to be a problem. See, because the pollutants reflect sunlight. So you'd get less warming if you had more pollution. That must have had them scratching their heads. Oh, and here's another reason you should probably doubt the science. As you said earlier, their very strongest claim is the most simple one. Ceteris paribus, all else equal, the greenhouse effect is real. But all else is not real, as you just described. They don't know how these feedback loops work. And follow the money. Who is funding all these various scientists' projects looking into these things? It's mostly the government, I believe. And if you'll quickly become smart enough to realize, after having several of your scientific grant requests rejected, that if you're not on the right side of the governmental ideological train, you're not going to get your project funded.
Yep. And I saw a good thing too early on when I first got into this, like a documentary put out by a skeptical organization, and they quoted a guy, and they were saying too, it's a lot of this, it's not as insidious as it might first appear. They were saying something like, let's say you're just a researcher, and what you care about, you really want to know, like bees pollinating stuff. That's what you really care about. They said you're much more likely to get funded.
Yep.
If you do it as, how does climate change affect this thing? So you still gonna get to go do the research or whatever, and you just got to throw in an angle. And clearly you're not going to say, oh, climate change doesn't affect it. You know what I mean? So
no, that's a great point. And I don't want to sound like a science hater. You are still seeing good science being done out there in the world, but it is in these more narrow niche things. People are trying to figure out, things about weather patterns and the honeybees and all sorts of other small things. But when it's all aggregated together into this very politicized narrative, it's the darndest thing. The solution to climate change is communism. It's government controls over the things that create wealth on this planet, which also happen to create carbon dioxide a lot of the times. Oh, and another thing that'll make you feel better. If carbon ever really becomes a problem, we have a lot of brilliant people on this planet that can figure out ways to get carbon out of the atmosphere. If it really is a problem, just go Google carbon capture inventions, and you'll see dozens of things that aren't necessarily profitable yet to do, but it's very early. And if things actually become catastrophic and dire, well, then they will become profitable to employ.
Yeah, and one term here is called geoengineering. So incidentally, this will reinforce people's concern that I am working for the World Economic Forum, because that's the thing too, where Bill Gates wants to build mirrors to reflect the sun, and right, I don't want Bill Gates to be in charge of that, but this is one of the things that really made me think, what the heck is going on with this climate change stuff, is when it was there was the first Freakonomics book, and then the follow-up, I think it was called Super Freakonomics. And one of the chapters is they were going around interviewing people who were working on, hey, what happens if, carbon taxes and these other more conventional measures don't work, and we do realize there's runaway climate change and we're absolutely screwed. What do we do? And people were doing, like you're saying, that they realized, oh, well, when Mount Pinatubo erupted, a bunch of stuff got ejected into the atmosphere, and then if we just go ahead and do that, they could use hot air balloons and just pumping the stuff up, and that reflects. So there's things could do to just buy a decade of breathing room, right? There's all, and then all longer term, you could put mirrors in space. You could, what's his name? Freeman Dyson, the Dyson sphere guy. Yep, he came up with all kinds of like you could genetically modify trees so that they absorb more carbon, and he's just doing all kinds of ideas. So all these people working on these things that it's just a fraction of the cost, that you could that conceivably, and there's downsides and whatever, but okay, if it's truly humanity's dead in 10 years, or if we do that, okay, maybe the ocean gets a little more acidic or whatever. Okay, isn't that better than everyone dying? So anyway, just working on these things, and just the people bit their heads off. Just, you know what I mean? And like the guy who was one of the chief guys that was interviewed by this thing was getting just excoriated by like the leading climate activist people. And he was saying stuff like he just threw the authors under the bus and was like, I was just, they came in and I had stuff, I had to get science out the door, right? Like his work product. He just called it science. I had to produce some science that day. And so, I went. So in other words, he had signed off on the galley proofs, right? They interviewed him or whatever, they did a thing. And then and they sent him the galley proofs and he signed off on it. And then when the book came out, guys like Brad DeLong just started like against copyright, were publishing it. And then eventually the publisher made him take it down and stuff. But him and Krugman, and I forget the other guy's name, who was more of a science beat guy, just were excoriating the others. And the point was, their argument, no, this will lead to complacency. We can't let the public believe there's a quick technological fix that only costs $10 billion. It has to be this $50 trillion carbon emission reduction global UN plan that they take over the energy sector and transportation.
I'm about to corner the market in carbon tax credits. I don't want to hear about a solution to the problem.
Right.
Jerk. I want to get rich.
So anyway, that was partly what, just it's like, if it's really this existential threat, wouldn't you be glad that, oh, thank God, there's people working on solutions that if it comes, and it didn't. I was like, no, these people don't believe this because for one thing, they would be huge proponents of nuclear power, and they're not.
Exactly.
In most cases. There was one guy, the name escapes me at the moment, James Hansen. So I think he actually believes what he's saying. He was an early, like he would testify to Congress in the 80s about this stuff. And he eventually, I forget his exact words, but basically said, yeah, we've passed the point of no return. We can't, this isn't going to, people aren't going to switch to electric or whatever. We just got to, have a huge increase in nuclear because clearly humanity's not willing to cut back on their consumption. So at least I thought, okay, he believes what he's saying.
Right.
Whereas the other people, no, we can't have nukes. Don't you know, 3 Mile Island, come on, Chernobyl. And, no, just everything with wind and solar. Okay. We have to keep moving here, Adam. What about the Russia collusion? You want to do that?
Sure. We can do the Russia collusion. How do you come down on that?
I will refer people to, with a lot of these things, all you have to do, just like I can go to Wikipedia and read stuff, the Inspector General, the IG is what I call him, the Inspector General report after the initial, the FISA, like what the FBI did in terms of making the FISA court requests to spy on members of the Trump campaign. So in the 2016 election, when Trump is first running for office, that's when, based on opposition research funded by the Clinton campaign, the FBI started looking into there's texts of, FBI guy texting his lover saying we're not going to let Trump win. I mean, this is all stipulated fact. And some of the FBI people, when they were going to the FISA court, because you need to get permission to wiretap people, they either outright lied or at the very least withheld extremely relevant information that, had the FISA court judge seen that, would have said, no, absolutely, I'm not granting this, right? And so there was an Inspector General report on all that stuff, and it was all, it was all in there, right? It wasn't like the exact thing that Donald Trump personally said, but it clearly showed he wasn't crazy, he wasn't paranoid. If people remember the timeline, there was a point at which he was saying, oh yeah, they bugged Trump Tower. And everyone was like, oh yeah, like on your phone, like your landline, or you know what I mean? Like just mocking him when, okay, he's an old guy and he, his terminology, but they really did go ahead and intercept his, electronically surveyed him and his campaign staffers. And so so the IG report comes out. And what was amazing to me was how the media spun it as if, confirmed Trump is a paranoid nut job. When it was like, no, it clearly showed the FBI lied or extremely misled the FISA court in order to spy.
Lie. When you're going to say this guy, Carter Page, we need to investigate him because he's he's working for Russia, and you have the CIA right there telling you, well, no, he's working for us. We know all about this, and you don't include that in the warrant.
Yeah.
These people.
So anyway, so I'll just say that, not only in my mind was there no, it wasn't simply that, oh yeah, they were honestly mistaken and there wasn't anything there. No, they knew there wasn't anything there. They were hoping to, I think they were hoping to find something, and were kind of surprised to realize, geez, there's nothing we can pin on this guy.
They did look. Yeah, I think probably the best resource to send people to is Scott Horton's brand new book, Provoke, which has an excellent Russiagate, collusion section in it. I'll
also include a link, at least if you're listening to the Bob Murphy version of the show version, is that when I just went through the IG report and just read some things, because again, I like doing that where it's, because you could say with Scott, well, what if he's just lying, or what if his sources are, here it's like, no, I'm just telling you what the Inspector General report said, and contrast that with how the media was reporting what this report says. It was just amazing to me.
No, I agree. It's shocking. And I don't know how we solve that problem. This is a different topic, but there's so many people that if we had a justice system, we would send all these people to jail. But how do you use the justice system to send members of the justice system to jail? I think we have an agency problem.
Yeah, we need to have anarcho-capitalism just for that.
Just for that. Well, I don't know, Bob. I've got 3 big ones I'd love to talk about,
Yeah.
but I'm afraid we're going to run out of time. How do you want to handle this?
I think we should plow through because we tease the people.
All right, the people have been teased. Do you want to do 9/11 or the moon or JFK?
Let's
Or
do
which
9/11.
order?
Let's do 9/11 first because I have
Okay.
less to say on that.
All I'll say about that is I think that do you remember Loose Change when that came out?
Yep.
I think it was the first pseudo documentary that purported to show that the government knew all about 9/11. In fact, they blew up the buildings themselves. And I had been, red pilled for a little while after I saw that. So I looked into it, and then I did what I recommend: go look for evidence debunking it. And by the time it was all over, I was convinced that if Dick Cheney didn't produce that thing, he probably was chortling when he saw it. Because if you and your horrible foreign policy for the last several decades actually did cause the blowback that caused 9/11, you'd be thrilled to death to have the most loud critics of your government saying the real problem with you is that you did it yourself. To make anybody who was critical of the United States government just be lumped in with these 9/11 deniers and whatnot. So, yeah, I think these claims are all nonsense. Go look at the debunks to the government blew up the buildings claims, and I think you'll be persuaded as I was.
Okay, that's interesting. So, and yeah, I'm glad you said that because that reminds me. I don't want to put words in their mouths, but I'm pretty sure all of the main guys associated with antiwar.com were not 9/11 truthers. That they thought, they thought, no, it was 19 guys and Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, it was Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and those are the guys that did it. Yeah,
they had boxing, and why did they do it? Well, Osama told us why he did it, and they thought, and so I often wondered, is it partly because of the reason you just said that? Again, not that anybody would be consciously lying on this stuff, but just like in terms of subconscious motivations and things like that. That knowing that it's as titillating as it might be or whatever, that's just such an extreme claim that it will weaken the opposition to U.S. foreign policy. And we, in other words, we don't need to say anything other than, U.S. foreign policy created this blowback, and that's all you need to know. And there's no point in continuing. So my personal odyssey with this is, I watched that. I don't know if I ever watched Loose Change. I know what it is. But the one that I saw that really got me in the conspiracy rabbit hole was my cousin had sent me this documentary called Wake Up Call. And I went actually recently and rewatched. And there's a few things in there for sure that I went and tried to verify. And I don't mean about 9/11 per se. I'm just like in general, like it's a very wide ranging thing.
Yeah.
Just kind of, bottle of red pills. Actually, they have that scene early on in the
Yeah,
thing.
I believe I've seen the one you're talking about.
And so I liked a lot of it, but they had some pretty interesting, in terms of making the argument or making the case that these were controlled explosions. They had a whole montage of all these firefighters, and unless they did a good doctoring job, it looked like it was like, the local New York news reporters, on the scene on 9/11 as it's happening, just grabbing firefighters and stuff. And they're like, I was over there, and then there's this pop, 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 and then and anyway, just making the kids and showing footage or whatever. So what I did is back when I was curious, I totally went into it. Went to the Architects for 9/11 Truth or whatever, and I reached the point where I can watch a guy who's got degrees in architecture and engineering, whatever, and he can look at the footage and tell me that's a free fall thing. That can't happen unless it's a controlled demo. And then I'll see somebody else with similar credentials looking at the exact same video and saying, see, it's not free fall, because you can see this piece of debris here. And so clear.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I realized I would need to go study engineering to know more. And since I don't trust the federal government at all, there's no point. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to change my opinion of them. Whereas if somebody who basically trusts their government, like, maybe you should go investigate that more. because it wouldn't matter. You know what I mean? But for me, whether they were in on it or not, in other words, I know they would be capable of doing it. I just don't know if they were on this one, if you get what I'm saying. So it wouldn't change my view of who we're dealing with. It's just, that one.
That's a good point, and it's a good point, place to pause and say, I believe the government is evil enough, venal enough, grasping and greedy enough to do all of the things that most of these conspiracy theorists accuse it of. That just doesn't happen to make it true, though. It's a logical fallacy.
Mhm.
And just epistemologically, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence to believe them. And, if you're going to tell me that somebody came in and actually wired up all these buildings, and a thing that would take normally an army of engineers several weeks to accomplish, you're going to have to come with some actual proof that that's the case for me to believe it, other than, well, they're horrible people and I wouldn't put it past them. I wouldn't put it past them either. But again, I think it's a shame that people, like, it takes a lot of time to understand the issues involved and go read antiwar.com every day for several years to figure out all the things that are wrong with the United States foreign policy, and read Scott Horton's excellent books on the subject. That's hard to figure out, like, what would motivate these Arabs to commit high altitude hara-kiri by flying jetliners into buildings. To truly understand what makes somebody do that is difficult. It's real easy to think, well, the government's evil, they blew the buildings up. That's simple.
So could I ask you just on this? I can believe, if planes really did crash into the thing and it could come down, and people say no, they were designed to fall under their own footprint and whatever, so that's not mysterious. Two things that are weird to me: Building 7 is just, not that I'm an expert on that. It's just the fire that comes from one building over there makes the whole 47 stories go down. That just seems weird to me. And then this is a huge crime scene, and the government just came in and just took all that debris and got it out of there fast to make sure nobody could go in and investigate. And that just, again, that would seem to me like, why would they do that? If they wanted, wouldn't they want to know who hit us?
Well, like the thing I've been saying ever since 2001 is that I do think they're withholding a whole bunch of information from us. But as far as like what caused Building 7 to go down, I don't know. But I do remember that day I was glued to the TV all morning, and all morning they said, Building 7's on fire, Building 7's on fire, Building 7's on fire. So when it went down too, I wasn't shocked. I don't know physically exactly what happened. I can't explain it, but I'm going to need a little bit more to, you'd have to come with a mechanism for why that went down and show some proof for that, rather than, more than just suspicion, right? You need something more tangible.
But like, if a bird flew into it and went down, and they said, "Oh yeah, it was that sparrow,"
right?
But I said, to me, that just doesn't seem plausible. And you say, "Okay, well then, Bob, you need to come up with a mechanism." I'm saying I don't see how a bird. And I'm saying the fire that I saw there, the whole building comes down. That just seems implausible to me. And again, not because there was a jet that went in and all the jet fuel's burning. It was just stuff falling from the next building over. Anyway,
I wish I had the original tapes from that, the news I was watching. Because I just remember him saying, the entire back of that thing has been on fire all morning, and I don't know.
Yeah, and that, by the way, so this is another example of the thing I'm talking about. That you will go read the conspiracy, the 9/11 truthers will say there is no other of the standards to which Building 7 was constructed. There's no other example in history of a building, of fire bringing down a building like that. That had those standards of fire suppression and blah blah blah. But then you'll read other people saying, no, there actually were. And they'll list, 5 examples of, there was this building in, Japan, and this one, and which I'm making those examples up. But I'm just saying where you'll have ostensible experts just saying contradictory things. So it's like, now I would have to go become an expert in building safety codes and blah, blah, blah to evaluate these claims.
The pot of gold at the end of the Building 7 conspiracy theory, so to speak, it was gold bars, right? Wasn't that the thing, that there's a bunch of gold bars in the basement, and so they took the building down to steal the gold underneath? Something like that?
I have heard that, but to me, I heard the main explanation was like all of the staging. Because like you said, yes, it did take weeks, Adam, to go ahead and lay all those few, and that's why there was the, those beams were all cut horizontally in a nice clean break, that kind of stuff. And all the staging from that was in Building 7, and that's why they had to take that down too. Because otherwise you say, well, what's the
Staging was
point?
there.
Why did
Okay.
they need to take it down? Right. Okay.
I was going to try to defeat one conspiracy theory with another. You know, if the whole plot was to steal those gold bars down there, well, you're forgetting the conspiracy that said that those were stolen and hollowed out decades before.
Oh, right. If they short sold them all, why would they?
Exactly.
Or maybe that's what they needed to take it out to explain why we don't have it anymore. No, we didn't short the market. It was just they were there and they got stolen on September 11th, or they got burned up on September 11th.
Another piece of advice I'd give the viewers and listeners is, like, I don't believe the government, knocked down those towers, but I'm not wedded to that position, right? Like, if evidence came somehow, a series of whistleblowers, and they came with receipts somehow, I changed my opinion on a dime. I just hate locking into a belief for no good reason.
So I'm glad you said that, but here, let me just say what's interesting on that is if you want to be a reasonable person, you say, I mean, come on, if that were true, wouldn't there just be like hundreds of certified, architects and engineers coming forward and saying this story doesn't make sense? And yes, there are. There's a whole organization called,
there are.
And again, maybe they're all wrong, or maybe they're all, in the pay of big conspiracy, or I don't know, but I'm just saying when you come up with these these things like, well, if that were true, you would see this, and it's like, yeah, that's true, and then, but I mean, surely CNN would get to the bottom of this,
That's why it's important to practice that mental hygiene. Try and debunk yourself the things that you believe. And here's one that gets me to this very day: be skeptical of news stories that conform to your pre-existing biases. You should treat it with the exact same skepticism that you'd treat something, the next new report that climate change is for sure real, and here's how we know. I'll treat a report like that, eyes askant. And I should do that when I hear something that supports something I believe too.
Yeah. It's like when Friedrich Hayek wins the Nobel Prize, and I can like, okay, for your pioneering work on business cycle.
Exactly.
Okay. 2 more?
Let's do it.
The best? Say we save the best for last. Okay. Do you want to pick the order? You know what they are. Which one do you want to do first?
Let's do JFK.
Okay. You want to go first?
I will go first. I will be pretty brief. When I first heard about the magic bullet theory, it was probably that Oliver Stone movie, Kevin Costner. That had my hackles up. I had my suspicions, and then I read a little bit about the Warren Commission, and my suspicions were raised even more. But I became convinced that elements in the CIA and the Pentagon, with the complicity of Lyndon Baines Johnson, either beforehand or after, I believe they killed the president. And I came to that conclusion because mostly it was in the cover-up. I think the autopsy of JFK is just a complete botched cover-up nightmare. And if you start digging into that, you will just be astounded at how clumsy it is. We'll put some links in the show notes pointing people to where you can find great books on this and even video lectures on the subject. The autopsy and what they did to the body, both in what's it called, Parkland Hospital in Dallas, and then when they got to Bethesda, it's just a joke. There's 3 different autopsies, 2 different brains, 2 different sessions before an audience. It's an unholy mess, and I think it's because they had a problem. They needed to figure out how to make this body, specifically this head, look like it had only been hit, with the one bullet from a particular direction, when I think the shot that killed him came from a completely different direction. And you always want to consider motive. And here, it's easy to believe why the CIA would hate this man. And also it would be easy to believe, with the Bay of Pigs invasion and him being really upset about what they were doing about regime change operations in Africa and elsewhere. And if you're a cold warrior who believes the domino theory and that the Soviet Union and communist China are about to take over the entire world and kill Western civilization, if you believe that, and you think you've got this lily-livered Boston doofus who's not willing to do the hard work it takes to protect America from the Soviets, well, I can see you talking yourself into thinking, well, I love my country, I have to kill the president. I find that totally believable in 1963. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at on it. I didn't want to believe that they could get away with killing the president for this many years, but that's what I think happened.
Okay, great. I mean, not great, but the So where I am on this is one of my laments is I decided at one point, this was back when I still lived in Nashville, and the Bob Murphy show at that point was relatively young. No, it wasn't even No. I take that back. The podcast wasn't even launched at that point. I was just going to do, it was on my blog. This is when people used to, it's called BLOG, folks. People used to do it. Like there was rotary phones and then there were blogs. And it was
Drive-in
short for-
movie theaters, roller rinks, and blogs.
Yeah, it was short for weblog. That's where
That's
where
right.
it came from.
That's right.
And I was going to do a multi-part series on this stuff, like just to say, you know, it's the kind of thing where I always used to say, yeah, if I had 6 months to really go in and read a bunch of stuff, but, you know, I don't have time to do that because there's a whole literature. And I said, why don't I just dip my toe in and just see how it is, get a sense of the terrain. And so I read a few books that were like, you know, conspiracy books, and then at least one, like the leading at the time, I think it was called Case Closed by Posner, was one that he was saying, no, the Warren Commission report's basically correct, and we can use modern ballistics and, you know, computer simulations and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, yep, well, Oswald could have done this, and it's not particularly impressive a shot. And that, okay. So I read all that stuff. I went into the Warren Commission and I went through, and I came to the conclusion, and my lament was I never wrote this up. I did all the reporting, and then I moved to Texas, and I, you know, put everything in boxes, and then, you know, you move and you're going, and I started at Texas, and it just, I didn't do it. And then it was kind of thing I'd have to go reread everything. But I was at the point where I was absolutely willing to go to the wall and say, the Warren Commission, that's not what happened. There's no way. It was demonstrably impossible that the sequence of events is just, it didn't work. And I don't even just mean, you know, the bullet holes and all that stuff, which is all true. But I just meant in terms of like where they said the car was and this happened and that. It was just, it didn't work. Like the story is the sequence of events. It just didn't work. And so that's different from saying, I know what happened. I was just saying, no, the official story isn't what happened. Yeah. But then if you say, okay, so somebody shoots the president and then the government covers up and gives a bogus story as to what happened, prima facie, that's pretty suspicious. You know, you'd think they would want to know what happened and whatever. And I did see one guy's theory, unfortunately, I can't think of the guy's name, that could have reconciled that, where I would have thought, oh, okay, if that's what happened, I could kind of see why they did it that way. And his theory was that, you know, Oswald is the main assailant, and they're going to the motorcade, and then, you know, the first shot goes out and, you know, hits him, and then the Secret Service guy jumps up on the back of the car and, you know, starts pulling his weapon to defend the president and accidentally shoots Kennedy in the back of the head.
Keystone Cops? That's what happened?
And so and the guy was saying, suppose that's what happened. You think the government's going to say, oh, yeah, see, what happened was there was a guy in the book depository. He took a shot. The secret agent mistakenly shot him in point blank in the back. You know what I mean? Like, just, no, people would flip out. So you could see why, yeah, if it were that, I could see why they just made up a whole thing. And everybody involved said, no, for national security and the good of the country, we just have to lie about what happened. I don't think that's what happened. But I'm just saying that was the one example I had seen of someone trying to come up with an explanation for why the Warren report, yes, is completely bogus. That's not what happened. But yet was basically Oswald was the lone gunman, you know, or the bad guy, this, you know, acting alone. There wasn't a conspiracy. Let me just mention. So go ahead. I got more to say, but if you want to chime in, go ahead.
No, you go first. Mine's
okay. So a fun thing that I stumbled upon, and I did a thing of this on the Bob Murphy show, Standalone. But let me just, folks, just quickly read to you from the Wikipedia entry on Alan Dulles.
Yeah.
Alan Dulles, I just got to read it. It's just 2 paragraphs, folks, so just bear with me, but you'll see the relevance. Again, this is a Wikipedia entry. This isn't, you know, I'm not going to Infowars.com here. It's Wikipedia. Alan Dulles, 1893 to 1969, was an American lawyer who was the first civilian director of Central Intelligence, DCI, and its longest-serving director. As head of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, during the early Cold War, he oversaw the 1953 Iranian coup d'etat, the 1954 Guatemalan coup d'etat, the Lockheed U-2 aircraft program, which are spy planes, the Project MK Ultra mind control program. I'm not paraphrasing. That's the Wikipedia entry. And the Bay of Pigs invasion of 1961. As a result of the failed invasion of Cuba, Dulles was fired by President John F. Kennedy. Right, so he was the first head of the CIA. He's in charge of overthrowing governments. That's what his job was, to overthrow governments. And he was also in charge of a mind control program. Okay. Dulles was a member of the Warren Commission that investigated Kennedy's assassination. Okay, I'll just stop there. All right. So you can just see how, that's kind of, so it's not stretching it too far. It's just like saying the guy who, made hamburgers for a living then went home and made a hamburger for his wife. Like, I'm not sure he would have made a hamburger for his wife. How would he have known how to do that? You know what I mean? It's like, because it was his job. All right. This guy overthrew governments as his job. And then, the guy who was his boss who fired him then ends up getting shot, and this guy is on the committee
fired him and
that
threatened
investigates.
to break the CIA up and scatter it to the four winds. The guy, Kennedy hated the CIA.
Yeah.
So no, all the pieces
doesn't prove it.
But, no, I get it, but I believe it. Just as an aside, I was at Freedom Fest last year, and I was watching a presentation by Jacob Hornberger of the Future Freedom Foundation, and he's been on the JFK trail for a long, long time. And he was going over the evidence that the CIA monkeyed with the Zapruder film. And he's going through it and laying out his argument. And literally, just at the moment where John F. Kennedy gets his head blown off in the film, everybody's phones start blowing up in the audience because Trump had just gotten shot.
Oh, wow.
And that was weird. Nothing means nothing, but that was a weird thing to experience.
Huh. Interesting. All right. Well, we saved the best for last.
All right. Let's talk about the moon. I don't know about you, Bob, but I don't believe there is a moon. The truth came out when I was teasing my cat with a laser pointer, shining it on the wall and going, "You silly kitty. There's nothing really there." That's when I realized that we do live on a flat Earth with a black dome, and someone's just shining a flashlight up there in the top, and we call it the moon. Yeah, we went there and landed on a flashlight beam. Sure, Murphy.
Okay.
Sure.
Interesting. Yeah. And I guess in that analogy, like the crops that come up are like our masters feeding us periodically. Yeah, the food just appears, and that's how we survive.
Manna from below.
Yep. Okay, but seriously, what is your view?
Seriously, I believe we went to the moon, and anybody who says we didn't is silly. And the only thing I needed to believe it is when Buzz Aldrin, at age 72 in the year 2002, punched that idiot jerk Bart Sibrel right in the face. And that Sibrel was age 37 at the time. And that straight right said to me, "Yeah, obviously we went to the moon." Just look at that. Look at that guy. That guy has the right stuff.
Yes. Of course, the other side would say the reason he was getting so antsy and upset was the truth hurt.
The reason I bring that guy up is because Sibrel has been making here in this year, 2024, it made the rounds on Joe Rogan, on Tucker Carlson, on Candace Owens, peddling the ground-shaking proof that we never went to the moon, or if we did, we lied about it on all the transmissions because he's got X, Y, and Z reasons that are easily debunked. Immediately go to YouTube and this guy's name and debunk, and the reasons why he's telling a bunch of lies come popping up. But I was annoyed that this guy was getting so much heat, so I went and looked up this story when Buzz Aldrin punched him in the face. This guy's just a jerk. If you hear him tell the story on Candace Owens, it's like, all I did is I said, "Look, if you went and stepped on the moon, just put your hand on this Bible and swear that you did. That's all I want." And Candace is going, "If I went on a vacation and my friend said they didn't believe me and wanted me to swear on a Bible, I would just swear on a Bible. This guy punched you. That doesn't make any sense at all." I'm like, "Candace, is this your ovaries talking? I would have punched him a lot more than once." This guy was poking him in the ribs with a Bible and calling him a liar and a thief and a cheat. And he called him up to that hotel under false pretenses, like he was shooting a children's television show for Japan about science. And so poor Buzz gets in his room thinking he's, going to do this little soft interview about the moon. And here comes this lunatic pelting him with a Bible, demanding that he swear fealty. Oh, my Lord.
We've talked about this before, right? The Bill Burr take on that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll link to it, folks. It's hilarious where Bill Burr is doing like the play-by-play commentary. Watching the thing.
It's so good. It's so good.
Okay. So on this, I want to be crystal clear, especially for people who see me on Twitter. On Twitter, I play the character. Like I play it like I'm being coy. You know what I mean? I can't think of a good recent example. I know what it was. The when the H-1B visa thing blew up, and so Vivek said, "Oh yeah, Saved by the Bell or whatever. How can U.S. culture compete?" And then people were like, "Well, Americans went to the moon," and so I waited on that, like, or did we? That kind of
Wink,
stuff.
wink. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to be crystal clear. I promise, coin this aside, I am not saying that, hey, I don't think we went. What I am saying is I think the case that we didn't go is stronger than a lot of people think. And so for sure, this particular guy you're talking about, yeah, maybe he's a nut job. I know that he was obnoxious in that one video that I saw. I haven't seen him on these other, podcasts or whatever. But let me just say some things, and then I'll let you respond, and then we'll wrap the show there. Okay, so Kennedy, said we choose to go to the moon not because it is easy. We do these things because it's difficult or hard. That was in September 12th, 1962. And he said we're going to do it, before this decade is out.
Yeah.
If in 2032, a U.S. politician said we are going to have a high-speed rail between New York and L.A., and we're going to do it by the end of the decade, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't get it done on time, right? There would be cost overruns or whatever. You would be amazed if they did it on time. So I'm just saying, prima facie, this is pretty extraordinary, right? That they would have pulled this off. Not just that they did it, but they did it on schedule.
My response is pretty simple. High-speed rail is always just a money-sucking boondoggle.
Mm-hmm.
But as inefficient and weak and awful as government is, I do believe they can accomplish things when they put their minds to it, such as build a nuclear bomb in a very short order, which seemed like an impossible thing. And this is similar. I think the evidence that we did go is certainly stronger than we didn't. And all the claims I see that we couldn't have, or this is the definitive smoking gun, it was all faked, all of those blow up, just by a puff of wind knocks them over. So, by the way, I'm with you that I'm not. Did you ever see that movie Capricorn 1? Early 70s, but that was the theme. All this happened on a soundstage, and then they had to kill the astronaut.
I know. No, I haven't seen it.
I believe the government's evil enough to do that, but I just don't see a shred of evidence that that's the case. And in fact, I do see plenty of evidence that we did. They'd have to be lying to us about what the spaceship that's currently orbiting the moon is seeing, because it looks down and sees the landing module sitting there. And
okay, well, hang on. All right, so let me just push back on you. Like, no, anything you say about it, I could collapse with the puff of wind or whatever you said. That hang on. It's possible there's other ways that stuff could have gotten to them. They can send stuff out, right? The issue is, did a man go and jump around the moon and come back, right? So they could get stuff physically to the moon without a man going, right? So there's that, and again, let me just say a few other things. Again, I promise I'm not saying I believe. I'm just saying the arguments against this, because one thing you could say is, well, surely like people on the inside would have known, like if it weren't going to happen, wouldn't people working at NASA or whatever, wouldn't they have known? And so, for example, there was this guy, Barron. Okay, so Thomas Barron was a quality control, again, Wikipedia, was a quality control and safety inspector for North American Aviation, NAA, when it was the primary contractor to build the Apollo command module. Okay, so NASA, has this task that Kennedy gives it, and then, NASA's spending all this money, and it contracts with this North American Aviation company, and your job is to build the Apollo command module. Okay, Barron compiled a 169-page report critical of safety standards at North American Aviation and leaked his report to the media. After NA learned of this, they fired him. And then it says, after the Apollo 1 fire, Barron wrote a 270-page report on NASA safety protocol violations, which he gave to Rep. Olin E. Teague's investigation at Cape Kennedy, Florida on April 21st, 1967. So just real quickly, what's this Apollo 1 fire?
Yeah.
Apollo 1, initially designated AS-204, was planned to be the first crewed mission of the Apollo program, the American undertaking to land the first man on the moon. It was planned to launch on February 21st, 1967, is the first low Earth orbital test of the Apollo Command and Service Module. The mission never flew. A cabin fire during a launch rehearsal on January 27th killed all 3 crew members. Okay, so in terms of the timeline, Kennedy announcing it in 62, as of early 67, when they were getting ready to do the thing, it just blew up or burned up on the launch pad, and 3 people died. So it went from they couldn't even get the thing off the ground and people died to 2 years later or 2.5 years later, they went to the moon and came out. Again, that doesn't mean it's impossible, but I'm just showing in terms of the milestones and wow, they're cutting it kind of close. Okay,
Well, the official story is
Yeah.
that the thing that killed the people in the cockpit didn't have anything to do with, the launch part or anything else. It was their. I mean, do I have any reason to believe that they're related?
I mean, a fire killing all 3 crew members is gonna scrub the mission, like in terms of hey.
Well, here's the real conspiracy. Let's
Yeah.
say those systems aren't even related. Did somebody, strike a match surreptitiously and kill Gus Grisham and his 2 pals just to make sure that they couldn't try and launch a rocket that would have fallen apart and crumbled 20 feet in the air if they tried to actually launch it?
I don't know what point you're making. No, I'm saying the fact that as of early 67, all 3 people died in a fire shows it's hard to send someone to the moon and bring them back, right? Certainly, Elon Musk's version right now is going to take a lot more than 2 years from now to do it. And this is, 70 years after, 65 years after.
Yeah, I don't look at this as a tech thing. I look at this as in the 60s, they were really motivated to do this, and they were being cowboys about the safety protocols and taking risks that we would not take now.
Right.
Because they thought, again, that this was a Cold War thing.
Oh, okay. Just hang on. I'm almost done. And then you can give your explanations that, well, no, actually, the fire proves that they did do it. Okay. So after that fire, this guy, Barron, he wrote a 275-page report on NASA safety protocol violations, which he gave to representatives who was investigating at Cape Kennedy, Florida, on April 21st, 1967. The chairman of the Oversight Committee claimed Barron had made available contribution to the Apollo fire probe, but that he had been overzealous, right? So in this is a scathing report. I have tried to get my hands on it. The Wikipedia references PDFs allegedly at NASA's website that's not there. I'm not saying that right there means it's a smoking gun. I'm just saying that's why I can't go in and tell you more about. I have seen conspiracy documentaries claiming this guy's report showed, yeah, they're way behind schedule. They're just spending money on all these things. In other words, his assessment, and he's the quality control inspector, as of 1967 was, there's no way this is going to work. We got to be honest with the American people. They're pushing this timetable that's crazy. There's no way, people are dying because of this ridiculous timetable. This isn't going to work, right? And then you say, all right, well, what happened to that guy? 6 days after his testimony, Barron was killed instantly along with his wife and stepdaughter when a train crashed into their car near their home in Florida. That's kind of weird. All right, so again, all I'm saying, kind of with the Architects for Truth and all that, you were saying, oh, come on, there would have been lots of people if it wasn't going to work that would have come forward. Well, this guy did it, and then a train hit him and took out his whole family. And, so there's that. Let me see. I'm almost done, Adam. Don't worry. What else is there in terms of being weird? I guess the last thing I'll just mention is the telemetry, the original, of the original landing and so forth. And, one small step for a man, giant leap for mankind, all this stuff. All that data was on, I forget what the media was, discs or something. And the official NASA explanation is we no longer have that because there were budget cuts and we just taped over it because we needed to use those for something else. That's their official position.
Not that it's gone, but we taped over it?
Yes. And so amongst other things, you could say, this is arguably some of the most important documents in human history. And you say, even if it were true that, oh yeah, those short-sighted politicians and they cut the funding or whatever after the public lost its, the program lost its allure, why didn't they sell it off to a private collector for, $100 million and then use that to go buy a gajillion times more of the you know what I mean, than rather than taping over it. Like, that just is kind of weird.
Yeah, that story I don't believe, and I'm sure it means something. And the story about this guy and his strange death, I think all these things should be looked into. But I am sort of jaded, I guess. I'm trained to just ignore the one lone guy waving a sheaf of papers because I see Bob Lazar in all of them, the guy who says, he worked in Area 51 and saw the aliens or, worked on the ships. I usually need a little bit more triangulation to believe something than the one lone guy. It does seem weird that he died in such a weird way. I'll grant you that. And the government taping over the thing that should be priceless data, that seems weird to me too. But I look at all of this as just weird stuff, but it doesn't support a very, very bold claim that this is all a lie.
Oh, sorry. Can I just say two more things quickly?
Sure.
So one is in terms of like getting, partly why I hesitated to go down this path was just, all the people in mission control, and you're saying they're all in on, and I realized it could, again, I'm not saying this is what happened, but I'm just saying.
They could be fooled too. They're just guys in a room.
Right. Suppose it's that they really did launch and they just went around the earth a bunch of times. And so all the people in mission control and maybe they timed it so they realized, oh, wait, we're hearing the transmission from mission control. Let's wait before we respond because technically we're,
someone else next door is feeding them the fake
yeah.
transmission of what they're supposed to be seeing.
Or they really are doing it, but they're just waiting for the time delay. Like, oh, we're actually just in Earth's orbit, but we're actually, they think that we're halfway to the moon at this point. So we got to wait because our message, return message wouldn't come back so quickly. I'm just saying, they could have been something like that where they really did have a successful launch and everybody there saw the rocket take off and they were gone for, a week or whatever it was. And then they came back. But what if they just went around the earth a bunch of times? So it could be that, that would solve the radiation, all those issues.
All the other countries who, would have seen them orbiting the earth when they're supposed to be.
Okay, right. So that was the thing too, that I thought, okay, I can kind of understand why the people working. Oh, and by the way, also, like you said with the Cold War, that would also explain why nobody working for NASA would spill the beans, besides just being fear of getting hit by a train.
Sure, I could believe that. Patriotism.
This could, right. Sure. That this is a thing, and Kennedy kind of shot his mouth off. Maybe that's why they took him out. They're like, "What are you doing?
What are you going to say?
Why didn't you say by 1989?" Oh my gosh. And so there's that element too. But right, I had wondered, well, okay, but why wouldn't the Soviets have just called them out on it or something and say, you said that rock's from the moon? Actually, our scientist Boris looked at it and da-da-da. But then I thought, and again, I'm just playing around here, but it occurred to me, I could see the Soviet officials being like, holy cow, let's see if they get away with this. Like that would just be a master class in how you can just lie to your people. And they'd be, I can't believe they got away with it. Let's take notes. This is amazing, And then they could say to their people, the Americans just sent a man to the moon. We need to have triple the military spending. Back to the factories, comrade. You're right. So it's not obvious the more I was thinking it through that they would, okay, I'm done. Go ahead. Poke holes in it. Make sure none of us gets fired.
Unfortunately, I can't get fired. Yeah, I don't have any holes to poke, except I just don't think it adds up to the extraordinary evidence that would be required to tear down, all the other evidence that says that we did go there.
Let me ask you this. Last thing on this one is, so by the way, if you go and watch the official NASA videos as to how, because we're going back, right? And in the video where they're talking about, this came out like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. In the video where they're talking about, it was called the Artemis program, I think, where they're going to go to the moon, build a base there, then they're going to stage that and go, for the eventual trip to Mars and build a colony. And so you see all these, it's a very PR, it's an infomercial kind of thing. We're going back. It's got uplifting music and stuff, and it's showing the history of the rockets and all this. And they say clearly in the thing that, I forget the exact phrasing, but it's like, we're doing it different this time. And they're making it crystal clear that we got to do all kinds of new technology, and the kind of rockets we're building is totally different from how we did it. And so one could say, so that's why when they keep hitting delays, because they already are behind schedule, and someone says, how come we've been trying to go since 2020, and, there was COVID, and then there was this, and it's still now it's 2035, and we still haven't gone to the moon. How did you guys do it back in 1969 if we can't do it in 2030? And they say, because we're doing it totally different. The technology. So I'm just saying that's weird to me. It'd be like the Wright brothers do their thing, and then 30 years later, it's like, yeah, we haven't flown since then, but we're doing a different kind of airplane design, and that's why.
Yeah, but the government's just dumb. They spent how many billions and billions and billions of dollars on the F-35 that does not work, and decommissioning the A-10 Warthog that is just the greatest airplane ever made, because they've got to do it different somehow. So they invent a plane that costs 500 million times more and doesn't fly in the rain.
Okay.
This is the government we're talking about.
And then that explains why they put a man on the moon in 1969. Okay. They
I'm
can't
just
make
saying,
a plane that flies in the rain, but they can do that.
well, back then,
Well, it doesn't rain in space.
the secret ingredient is back then we had the right stuff, Bob.
Right. Buzz Aldrin.
We could probably get Buzz Aldrin right now up there if we really wanted.
He would just hold his breath and
yes,
jump. Yeah.
Yes. Buzz can do it. All right. Well, that was fun. Anybody who took Bob's side of the argument there, just go try to debunk everything he said, and that'll be that be in placeholder of all the responses I was supposed to give there.
Two more quick ones, really fast.
Okay.
One thing I've seen, I promise I'm not making this up, is when people would bring forth photos and claim, oh, this was allegedly taken, on day 2 of the landing and blah, blah, blah. And, there was some alleged problem with it that, oh, you can see right here, there's a thing, but no, the moon would have been on the other, or the sun would have been on the other side and the shadow's going the wrong way. I'm making stuff up, but when people would, I promise, I have seen some defenders of the orthodoxy who said, no, we did go say, yes, you're right, that is a doctored photograph, because as the deadline got closer, they did get prepared to fake it. And so they did start. I promise you I've seen that. Now, I'm not saying it was Ronald Reagan who said it, you know what I mean? But it also wasn't like some guy on a Reddit thread. Like, it was a more, official, because I was doing what you said, like, going and looking at the official conspiracy theorists and then going and looking at the official debunking, like websites with FAQs and whatever.
Is there such a thing as a false flag debunker, to make it look like anybody who debunks is a lunatic? So therefore all the accusations have to be true. Maybe.
But anyway, I'm just saying that I have seen that in terms of, like, here's the, the various, stuff like, why would the flag have been, pointed? There was no wind. And that's an easy one, because they had a stiff rod and they're holding the flag up and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. How come they didn't sink into, up to their knees in dust? Because people were worried about, okay, then you can see the official response. And I'm just saying, I did see on one of the photos that are, like, in the official archives, that they said this couldn't possibly even take it on the moon because of blah, blah, blah. And the response I saw was, yes, you're right, that was faked when they thought they might have to fake it, but it turned out we didn't have to.
I just figured out exactly what that was.
What?
That was you. That's exactly what you would say.
Okay, I didn't.
You would have piped in.
I didn't lie just now.
You would have piped in on Twitter and you just said, yeah, that was for they went to fake it, but they didn't have to.
Right.
Wink, wink, emoji sign off.
I didn't say it wasn't me who wrote that. Right.
Kudos.
And then, so my question to you is, would you suppose it gets to be, I don't know, 2035, and Elon and all these guys scratching their heads, and he's like, man, this is really tough to get a human on the moon.
If
at some point, would you start thinking,
oh yeah, if it's Elon or somebody that I viewed as credible, and they said, I don't understand. We went back and actually tried to do it the exact same way, and this just can't be done. And every time we try and send humans up anywhere near the Van Allen radiation belt, they just turn into the Fantastic Four. Of course I could change my mind. Especially if it's somebody who came with a background that I viewed as credible. So show me.
All right.
I'm from Missouri. Show me.
All right. Aeronautical engineers for truth.
Oh, good Lord. This is a long one, Bob, but this was ever so much fun. Visit heymannature.substack.com. Visit bobmurphyshow.com. Go check out my show, Heyman Nature, on YouTube. And thank you, Bob. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will catch you next time.
And remember, if someone tries to get me canceled for anything I said in this, I was just making a joke.
We was all just joking, folks. Bye-bye.